The Lions have an extremely talented roster, and we know they're going to be recovering from a ton of injuries, especially defensively as they head out of the 2024 season. So let's focus on the three biggest needs for the Detroit Lions as we get closer to this NFL draft. And I think the number one biggest need for this Lions team is across the defensive line. Defensive edge, defensive tackle, finding more talent up front. We talked about how the Philadelphia Eagles were able to dominate the Super Bowl against the Chiefs, and that's because of their defensive line. They got so much pressure with their front four, they didn't even need to blitz. Now, I'm not saying that's the norm or that you only can pressure with your front four, but we know where the Lions struggled towards the end of last season. Aiden Hutchinson week down in week 5, multiple injuries stacked up on top of each other. Aleem McNeil is then lost against Buffalo as we get towards the end of the season, and it really turned into an unrecoverable situation on the defensive line for the Detroit Lions. So the number one need heading into this draft for me, for the Lions, is on the defensive line. The number two biggest need for the Detroit Lions heading into this draft is across the offensive line, and I think specifically in the guard or center position. The Lions' basis for their offense is on the strength of their offensive line. Their front five at times has been the best offensive line in football, but I think in 2024 you saw some cracks, especially at the guard position. Kevin Zeitler was good. It was a great offseason pickup for the Lions, and he filled in well. On the other side, Graham Glasgow started to show his age a little bit, and the Lions have signed him for multiple seasons now. They ended up having to bring in rookie Christian Mahogany to kind of fill in during injury time, and he filled in very admirably. So it shows the importance of the Lions building and sustaining depth across the offensive line. If this offense for the Lions is going to continue to be one of the best in football, they have to reinvest across their offensive line. So the number two need for the Lions is on the offensive line. The number three biggest need for the Lions as we head towards the draft is kind of a toss-up, and it really depends on what happens in the offseason before we get to the draft, specifically with free agents Tim Patrick, the wide receiver, and Carlton Davis, the cornerback. If the Lions decide to bring both of those gentlemen back, then we'll have to decide what the bigger need is. If the Lions bring back one and not the other, then to me, that position where they didn't bring the player back becomes the third biggest need as we head into the draft.